Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about how to capture the northern lights on camera, whether you're using a professional DSLR or your smartphone. Photographing the auroras can be a bit tricky, but with the right settings and tips, you'll be able to get some stunning shots. Now, let's dive in. Photographing the northern lights requires a bit of patience and knowledge of your camera's settings. The auroras are often faint to the naked eye, but can be captured in vivid detail by your camera thanks to longer exposures. Let's start with the basics. The first thing you'll need is a sturdy tripod. This is crucial because northern lights photography requires long exposures and any movement will blur your shot. You also want to be in a dark location far from city lights or light pollution with clear skies. Now, let's talk about the ideal camera settings for photographing the auroras using a DSLR or mirrorless camera. Here's a breakdown of the key settings you'll want to adjust. First, you'll want to set your ISO to a relatively high value to make your camera more sensitive to light. Start around ISO 800 to 1600. If you go too high, your images might get too noisy or grainy, so it's a balance between sensitivity and quality. Depending on the brightness of the auroras and how much ambient light there is, you can tweak your ISO as needed. Next, you'll need to set your aperture, also called the f-stop. You want a wide aperture to let in as much light as possible. Set your f-stop to f2.8 or the lowest your lens allows. A wide aperture means a shallow depth of field, but that's okay since you'll be focusing on the sky. The goal is to capture as much light from the auroras as possible. Shutter speed is perhaps the most important setting for northern lights photography. You'll need a long exposure to capture the movement of the lights. Start with a shutter speed of around 5 to 15 seconds. If the auroras are moving fast, go for a shorter exposure to capture more detail in their movement. For slower, more diffuse auroras, you can increase the exposure time. Just be careful not to overexpose and lose the detail of the lights. Finally, you'll need to set your camera to manual focus. Autofocus tends to struggle in dark conditions. Switch to manual focus and focus on infinity to ensure the stars and auroras are sharp. To help with focusing, you can use live view and zoom in on a distant star or the moon to make sure everything is crystal clear. Now, what if you don't have a DSLR or mirrorless camera? Can you still capture the northern lights with your smartphone? Absolutely. Modern smartphones can capture the auroras, but you'll need to make some adjustments to get the best results. Most smartphones these days have a manual or pro mode, which lets you adjust settings similar to those on a DSLR. If your phone has this feature, here's what you'll want to tweak. Start by setting your ISO to around 800 to 1600, just like on a DSLR. For shutter speed, aim for 4 to 10 seconds depending on how bright the auroras are. You'll also want to set your focus to manual and focus on infinity to capture the sharpest images. If your phone's default camera app doesn't offer manual settings, you can download third-party apps like ProCam for iOS or Camera FE5 for Android that give you more control over ISO, shutter speed and focus. These apps let you fine-tune your settings and often deliver better results than the built-in camera app, especially in low light conditions. Just like with a DSLR, you'll need a tripod for your phone to keep it stable during the long exposure. You can also use a remote shutter release or set a 2 to 3 second timer to avoid any camera shake when you press the shutter. Even a small movement can blur your shot, so the tripod and timer are crucial to get a clean, sharp image. Before we wrap up, here are a few final tips to help you capture the perfect shot of the northern lights. If your camera or smartphone supports it, shoot in RAW format. RAW files capture more detail than JPEGs and give you much more flexibility when editing your photos later on. RAW files are larger, but the extra detail you'll be able to pull out during post-processing is totally worth it. Don't forget, cold temperatures drain camera and phone batteries fast, so make sure to bring extra batteries or a power bank. Keep your spares in a warm pocket to extend their life. The last thing you want is to have the perfect shot lined up only for your battery to die. And there you have it. With the right camera settings, a good location and a bit of patience, you'll be able to capture stunning photos of the northern lights, whether you're using a professional camera or just your smartphone. Have you ever tried photographing the northern lights? Let me know in the comments how it went. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more photography tips and tricks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Subscribe for more photography and nature videos. Quick recap of the key camera settings for capturing the northern lights. ISO 800 to 1600, aperture f2, 8 or the lowest your lens allows, shutter speed 5 to 15 seconds, focus manual set to infinity, use a tripod and remote shutter release or timer, shoot in RAW format if possible, bring extra batteries or a power bank. Happy shooting.